It is a great honor and a privilege to introduce Sigmund, Siggy, Weiser, and Marilyn and Barbara, and we're here in your beautiful apartment in Yerushalayim. And if you can tell us the most amazing story about your father.
So, Daddy, you'd like us to tell them about you. You were born on January 10th, 1928. My father just celebrated his 96th birthday, and you were born in I know you're 96. You were born in Tashnad.
Yeah.
In Tashnad, Romania.
Yeah.
And as a young child, his family moved to the town of Satmar. And Satmar was in Romania?
Also
Romania.
Das was belonged to Satmar. Das was belonged to
Satmar, that is the same region.
It's one. I don't know exactly what. I don't know.
And then my father was the oldest of three children. His mother was Sarah, from the family of Rabenstein, and his father was Moshe Weiser, and he was the oldest. He had two younger siblings, Fege Perel and Shmuel. And my father went to the Satmar Cheder, and he learned. He went to the shul of the Satmar Rebbe. And at 9 years old, he went to the yeshiva in a town called Holme.
Yeah. I'll go to the yeshiva. I think actually I was 9 years old. I was going to Wolfheffer.
To Wolfheffer. His teacher, his uncle was his Malamed. His uncle Wolf Pfeffer was his Malamed.
This taught me.
My father likes to tell this funny story. When he went to the yeshiva in a dormitory in Holme. What they would do is they would eat their meals at different people's homes. It was called take. And he was in one of the homes, and the woman gave him a soup, and he didn't like it. So when she left the kitchen, he poured the bowl of soup back into the pot. And when she came out, she said, "Oh, you finished the soup?"
And then what did you do?
Soup.
You like it? Oh, you like it? So let me give you another bowl. So she took another ladle.
He said, no, I had enough.
He said, "No, I had enough." And she took another ladle and he poured it for him.
I was 9 years old at the time in the car. I was crying and I went out. I went to the post office. I called
Your mother.
telephone, Heim. So called my mother's telephone was. So the next day my mother came for me, and she registered.
So he went to the post office, right?
Yeah.
So he went to the post office to do the phone to call his mom, who had a phone, and then the neighbors.
There was a phone, like not too many phones in Satmar at that time. So and she came the next day, and she arranged for my father to only have his meals by her sister's house, who lived in there, who was the Mima Mendel. His aunt Mendel was married to Wolf Pfeffer. They had 13 children. Only one survived. Only one survived the war. Her name is Perry. But my father was very close with these cousins. Yeah, she was their child. And he was a Malamed, and my father's Malamed. That's an early story. My father likes to.
I don't know what story you're telling.
About the Mendel? About that. I told the story that you like to tell about the food, that you didn't like the food in there. But then he continued to study in the yeshiva in Satmar. And then his grandparents lived very nearby. Elazar Weiser, married to Chaya, like his Zaidi and his Babi, he called them, and he had a very close relationship with them. His grandmother Chaya came from her maiden name was Grunfeld, excuse me, was Grunfeld, and they also were Satmar.
And they descend from the person who actually brought in the Satmar Rebbe to Satmar, a man, a Gavir in the community who was Meshulam Zisha Grunfeld. My father was named for him, actually. And so Meshulam Zisha Grunfeld, which is our third great grandfather, second great grandfather, something, brought the Satmar Rebbe's family, the Teitelbaums, into Satmar, and that's how they became known as the Satmar community. Anyway, and that was my father's family, so he was very close to the Rebbe, and my father's grandfather, Elazar Weiser, was a Maggid Shir in Satmar. And so they had a family that was very, very close to their Rebbe.
And then he had, even during the beginning of the war, he had a fairly good life in Satmar until March 1944, until the Germans invaded.
Yeah. Good year, of course.
Before you had
anti-Jewish laws.
Anti-Jewish laws.
All those by the way, even I get it. Before the Germans came.
Even before the Germans came in, he's saying they were.
The Germans came in one day, and a few days later, we left.
The first they set you up in the ghetto.
Right, so the anti-Jewish
There
laws
was
in the state.
anti-Jewish laws, one after the other, but somehow when he would tell the story, they were able to live with it. The star, the curfews, they weren't allowed to leave their house, they weren't allowed to limit in the businesses. But he was a young child, and they adjusted. But within a few days of them in the invasion, they set up the ghetto. And your house.
I don't remember. I could tell the details.
Right. So we'll.
The details. You read about paper.
Right. And your house fell out in the ghetto. Your house was in the ghetto. In other words.
The ghetto in Satmar?
Yeah.
It's not in Satmar. I forgot all about it.
Okay, that's not bad. It's actually my way of to say. Yeah. It's good because your house was in the ghetto. You didn't have to move. So.
My grandparents' house is in the ghetto. What do you the ghetto is talking about?
In Satmar.
They get confusing me. Come to girls.
I know, with a lot of girls in the family. We have two older sisters.
You didn't mention that.
When we're all together, it's quite a lot of energy there. My father always would talk about how there were laws within the community to support, like before the anti-Jewish laws, there were laws to support the Jewish community within Satmar. Like there was not like a separation of church and state, but they had like laws about who can sell kosher meat, right, and things like that. They would
made sure that everybody had a chicken for Shabbat,
right?
For Shabbos. So you would pay for the chicken depending on how much you could afford. But the Kehila, the Jewish community in Satmar, assured that this way every family had a chicken for Shabbat. And then in terms of the ghetto, once it was set up, it was just for a very short time. And then the transport started. And my father remembers them leaving their house, and
what day was it? Friday? Was it Friday or Shabbos?
Saturday. It's always.
Yeah.
Right.
Remember, was it Friday or was it Shabbos? When was it? Friday or Shabbos?
It was the time of Shavuot. Shavuos.
Yeah.
Because they arrived in Auschwitz in Shavuot. He. You remember we'll talk about the davening that you had
There.
in Auschwitz that first night. It's okay. These are good things to forget.
Right, exactly.
But I believe it didn't happen. We had a Tuesday night, I think.
Was it a Tuesday?
Oh, it's Tuesday.
I don't remember.
No, I think it's, okay, so, let's just step up, let's, right, that's good, we have the
We
book,
have it in the
Papa,
book.
we have the book.
Yeah.
But let's talk, let's say maybe when the deportation happened, you were walking through the streets with your family,
Yeah.
okay, and to the train.
And his neighbors, the Gentiles, the Hungarian Gentiles, were yelling, "The Jews are going to their death."
They knew.
They knew. They knew. My father had said, and he didn't. He was a young man. He was only 16. He wasn't worldly. They didn't have internet.
Right, he always says he's at a level of like a contemporary level would be like a 12-year-old boy. He had no idea of the outside world.
Yeah.
To him, he had no idea. It looked like an adventure. He had no idea.
Well, in terms of
about
what was going
what's going on,
what
he
was
had
going to be
nothing.
happening.
What was
in
happening.
terms of like the world news, or he also, they said he heard most of the news he heard at the mikvah. That's where he went. They didn't have a radio in their house, and so he would
So
go
you heard the news at the mikvah.
at the mikvah every
You
night.
heard the news at the mikvah. Most of the news, you didn't have like a television.
But they
Yeah.
they walked through the town, and he was with his grandparents on the train, and his mother, his sister, and his brother, and his aunts and uncles, and the ones that lived in their area. They were all together. I remember him saying that when his
He came up with different reasons. You tell us all story.
Oh, he told me your whole story.
Then
Well, we know the
you
story.
create something from nothing. He came to listen to something.
and he's getting the whole story.
Right, we know, we've heard the story. You don't mind, you can say.
You want to
We're giving the story.
We have all the
Yeah,
books.
we have your books.
I remember you telling that when your grandfather was going up the ramp to the cattle car,
Yeah.
that he fell or something. He fell, and then they were very mean to him, and you were very shocked.
No, I don't remember that. I forgot everything.
It's good. That's good.
I don't remember everything.
So he, on the train, he would often say that there was one pail. He doesn't like to go into the details of what that was like, but he's like, you could not even actually, you can't even imagine what that would be like to be on that train with your family, your grandparents, and strangers, and there's one pail. They tried to do it in a modest way when they had to relieve themselves.
And was a cattle cart.
It was a cattle cart.
cart.
It was a cattle cart, and there was barely any room. He describes that he was able to sit on the floor next to his mother and lean on her for comfort. When the trains were passing by Sons, the town of Sons, they saw the sign. They saw the sign that said Sons. And if I'm not mistaken, they actually got off the train there, and his grandfather was very happy at that time because he was a chassid of the Rav Halberstam, which was the Sanza Rebbe, and he, like my father remembers, he remembers clearly his grandfather looking around and saying, maybe this is a good sign because they're in Sons, but it wasn't actually a good journey after that. The next stop was Auschwitz, and that was the last time my father saw his grandparents, his mother, a sister and brother.
He came for different reasons.
No, he did come. This is the reason he came. He wants to hear all the details,
To
Papa.
hear all the story.
You could sit here all day long.
He's like, yeah, that's fine. We're going to give him breakfast too. Okay, don't worry. All right, we'll give him a pillow and we'll give him breakfast. There's one poignant story I would like to.
Yeah, so tell him.
The story about his little brother Shmuel, who was not yet bar mitzvah, so he was starting to put on his tefillin and every day, and he wasn't allowed to take his tefillin with him. And you said, I
Off the
think that's
train.
why on the train, and he was bitterly crying. This beautiful 12-year-old boy was bitterly crying
Almost
because,
13.
yeah, and he's 12. No, he's 12 years old. You start when you're 12.
Right,
And right.
a
So
few weeks
before,
right.
even before you're 12.
No, you start
No.
a few weeks before you're 13.
Right, yes. So like this 12-year-old child was crying bitterly because he wasn't able to take his tefillin with him. Because I think it was Friday, it was Shabbos or
Off the
something,
train.
Friday night, that was muksa. There was some sort of an issue. And that's like an issue. My father would tell us this story.
And his mother said that, told his brother, "Don't worry, they're going to bring us our suitcase. They're going to bring us our bags. Wherever they take us, you're going to have your tefillin." Unfortunately, what we know, we don't know for sure because there was no sign of his brother after that or his grandfather. So his grandparents and his brother were taken, he feels, right away to the gas chambers. That as soon as they got there, his mother and his sister were actually went to the women's camp, and this was Shavuot. They survived until Erev Hoshana Rabbah, Sukkot, when there was a big selection in Auschwitz, and that's when his mother and his sister were taken. So my father says when he got there, they were yelling at them, and then there was a Polish Jew that asked my father how old he was, and my father said, "I'm 16," and the Polish Jew said, "You're 18," and my father says, "But I'm 16," and the Polish Jew smacked him, and he says, "If you say you're 16, you're going to go up to the chimney. The chimney, that's your way out of here." My father was thinking, he didn't know what this guy, he thought he was a crazy person, and he thought he was saying to my father that the only way to escape from here is through the chimney. But he didn't understand what he was saying about being 18. And my father also saw the same man and other men like him were taking babies from mothers and giving these babies to the old women. And my father thought at the time how cruel he is, and the mothers were crying for their babies, but he was taking the babies, these Polish Jews who saw what was happening, he was taking the babies from the young women, because the young women could survive in the selection. If they were young, they could work, but if they're holding a baby, then they go with their baby to the gas chambers. So he was taking the babies from these young mothers and giving it to the older women, because the older women anyway were going to their death. So in order to save the young women, that's what he was doing. My mother also had similar circumstances. My mother also was carrying her sister's baby, and then they told her, "Give the baby to the mother." And she gave the baby to the mother, and then and her sister and the baby went to the gas chamber, and my mother lived. So,
right. But within my father's family, so his grandmother probably was sent right away.
yes, his grandmother
right.
also.
And also he had siblings, he had twins. He had twin aunts, identical twin aunts, that we found out later were used by Mengele for the experiments. And that is how...
Did they survive?
No,
Right.
no, they didn't.
So, and then he had another aunt with the baby, Balchu, with
Right,
Disha.
so they didn't survive.
Yes. So he was deported with this.
The whole family. So actually, my father had his siblings and his aunts, and that he went with. He was the only one that survived. So there was also a cousin of the same age that when he was in the camp, he went to the infirmary and he saw his cousin there, and then the next day his cousin wasn't there. So it was the end. So he when he got there, they gave them showers, and they told them to keep their belt and their shoes. And so he said the procession of men grown men, young men, everyone, and the only thing they're holding is a belt and their shoes. And then that was...
And then how humiliating that was, because with everybody in the community,
it was a process of dehumanization.
Yes. And he would talk.
From the minute that you arrive there.
Mm-hmm. And also he mentioned that there was a sound that he always said that was part of his memory, the sound of boots marching on gravel. That's what he heard. We can imagine boots on gravel, that sound. Boom,
because there was
boom,
gravel
boom,
like
boom.
pebbles and the sound
Right.
of it, of that in Auschwitz.
And he, and it was, when the train arrived and they jumped off the train, they told him, he didn't see his mother again. He didn't see his family again. It was separated. It was like, he used to always say, it was like a sea of humanity. And you couldn't see anything. It was just, I had no idea. And he was a very little boy. They're not very innocent. He always says how innocent he was and no idea what was going on.
And then when he got to the person who asked him how old he is, which my father said he only found out later that was Mengele, because he had never heard Mengele's name, the Satan, the devil Mengele, asked him how old he was. My father said he doesn't actually remember what he said. He like mumbled something. And then, but he gave them the sign to live, to go to the right.
Right.
And that's where it was. And then they were shaven, and he was given a tattoo, and his number is A8677. It's been rubbed out, but we have photos of it because of his skin was. Yeah, how many years?
It's so many years.
80 years.
80 years. 80 years.
80 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Here
we go. You just see a little blue.
Oh, you can still see.
Yeah. See, there's the. You can't make out the number of it, but you see the blue from it. It was a small numbers. It was. It was A86.
8677.
8677. A for Auschwitz. A for Auschwitz. Did you want to? See that here again?
Yeah.
And then,
And does your Abba remember having the tattoo put on?
yes, he actually remembers the conversation
Right.
he had with the person that was tattooing him.
When you got the tattoo, in Auschwitz, when they gave you the tattoo, you spoke with the man and he spoke with you. Do you remember what he said?
He said, "This is your lucky number."
It's a lucky number.
Well, my father wasn't sure. My father didn't understand at all what he meant. And we also, it was more like if you got a number, then they're going to put you to work and you have a chance to live. So, but over the years, my father made different associations with the number that were. He added up the numbers.
Right. It's somehow in his life, these numbers followed him actually.
Yes.
In addresses and phone numbers.
And also 8677, you add it up, it comes to a 28, I'm sorry. It comes to 28. And his day of liberation was actually April 28th.
Yes.
And then there were other situations that had to do with 28, like my sister said, his addresses and different. 28 was his lucky number. So in Auschwitz, they were brought to a barrack. When they got their pajamas, they got their uniforms. They didn't know what it was. Some of the stories, I just want to back up a moment. A lot of the stories I'm telling is because my father was the witness that went along with the...
Take a book and read.
My father joined Yad...
I'll tell you.
Right, we'll tell you.
He's going to read
my stories.
The story.
Yeah, I
I'm
have
going to give him the
one.
book also.
Yeah.
So the...
But he wants to hear us tell it.
It's very special. Siggy, it's very special.
He says it's very special to hear it. It's very
It's
special.
such an honor.
He says it's an honor to hear your story.
Les loves us telling the story, so let's tell him the story, okay?
So so my father joined Yeshiva
He
Kotel.
didn't come in his stories.
He's so happy to be here, Papa.
I really
He's so
am.
happy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's a
look.
very big schut to be here.
Look
The
at that,
biggest
he's
honor
so
and
happy.
privilege.
Let him stay and we'll tell the story.
Can I give you a little drink, Daddy?
Yeah, have a
Yeah.
something.
I got it. I'm holding it. Slowly.
Marilyn, maybe can we show a few pictures of the family?
Barbara?
Yes, okay. Oh, let us see. Okay, so here, you can show this picture first.
Maybe
Right.
take it out the plastic.
Oh, yes.
because
Let
it's-
me give you
Right.
more of this. I can get you in a second. In a minute.
Is this good?
Very good.
All
Is
right.
this clear, Barbara?
Is that clearer? I don't know.
Okay.
Maybe this is
Okay.
better. Okay, just,
So that picture is of my father's family. My father is not in this photo, actually. Nobody survived from this photo.
nobody.
That's his mother, his younger brother Shmuel, his sister,
Perry.
Perry, and then his cousin and his grandmother. His grandmother Chaya is over here. His twin aunts are over here, Yenta and Fega Weiser, and his aunt is over here, and her name is Bela Weiser, and her little boy Zisha. My father might have been in yeshiva, and therefore didn't it wasn't in the photo, but that was a photo that
But
nobody
here
survived.
on the bottom.
Yeah, I have a better photo
Oh,
of
you
that
better
one
one
over
then?
there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oops.
Actually, it's not. So this is my father and his mother and his sister and brother.
Oops.
And they didn't survive. Here, he was younger here. This is, my father was about 9 or 10. And then they were quite Hasidish. They're Satmar, and he has that Satmar hat. Then we have, they lived comfortably. This is his mother and his sister. My father's father had gone to America
And here's a picture.
for work.
His mom and his dad.
Yeah.
Mother and father.
They were very, very Hasidish.
Satmar.
Yes, Satmar.
They were very Hasidish. This is their engagement photo. And then let me just see if there are other photos. After the war, shall I just pass? I'll just give you a bunch of different photos. After the war, my father from Buchenwald went to France, and in France, number of the boys, they had one of the pajama uniforms from Auschwitz, and they took photos in this Auschwitz uniform. And this is him. He's 17 here. This is after the war.
Okay, and
Can I ask, how did they survive, the original photos of the
Oh,
family?
because his father was in America, so they sent photos to America.
Otherwise we wouldn't have them.
Otherwise, we would have. We have, let's say, with my mother's family, we only have 2 photos of the 2 of her brothers,
That's it.
because those photos were sent to America. We have no photos. We had no photos. We started our genealogy search that we did, and we found many relatives, but we started because we were looking for photos of my mother's family. And we started locating people that were related. We found many relatives that we didn't know survived or existed even, but we didn't find photos of her family.
right.
That's for the next search.
And I think to a certain degree, I think that was a blessing, because my mother, who passed away about a year ago, lived the trauma every day, and I think that she really struggled, and I think that had we found a picture of her mother,
She never had a picture.
no, I think had we found a picture
Or
of her
her
mother,
parents. Or,
yeah, it would have
Give
been.
him
Let's look
Here,
to
here's
hear more.
I'm going to show them this beautiful picture of you and mommy. You and mommy at their wedding. So my parents, I'll go back, but they met in Brooklyn, in Williamsburg, and were married there at age 21. My mother's also a survivor.
We do have.
So
other- I think we should tell the story, and then we can go, because we have other pictures, family pictures
Right, we
maybe
have the
that.
family pictures that
we should have
the
in
happy
order.
ending, as my father
Yes.
always says. He had has a very happy ending, and it's not over yet.
Can I ask, what did your father do in Auschwitz? What did he
So
do?
one of the jobs he did was a bricklayer. He would they were building houses for the officers, the Nazis, the SS officers, and they taught him how to lay bricks. And he remembers that he was told that he was doing a very good job, and he was in charge of doing the corners. Yeah, it meant he was able to do it well because they gave him the job of doing the corners of the building. And also then you were also dragging
I don't remember how to put it.
you don't remember how to do a bricklayer?
Oh, too bad.
Nothing, absolutely nothing.
And then there was another job that he
I
had.
read this whole story, the story, because I told you the right
Right.
name. I don't know, that's what I got this also.
And then he
No,
was,
no.
you would be laying cables underground, and then digging and laying the cables. And he worked for the company IG Farm,
IG
which
Farm.
was slave labor. In other words, the Germans were paid by IG Farm.
Farben, isn't it Farben? Not
Right. He
Okay.
says it's actually, he calls it like farm,
IG Farm.
like pharmacy farm,
Oh.
IG Farm.
Oh,
And he was working as slave labor. And he remembers that he had to be clean, so he would have to shower every night, and the showers were far away from his barracks. And in the freezing weather, in the Polish winter, he would have to run wet from the shower back to his barracks every night.
wow. Pretty amazing.
Right.
My father's very tough, Baruch Hashem. He's so very physically fit, even during the entire time, the fact that he survived. And he has stories that...
Did your father speak about being hungry?
All the time. Hunger, the hunger was the most painful of it all. And hunger hurts. And like I said before, the stories that I am repeating are things that he told the groups that he guided.
Yes, and can you tell the first time that he was asked to go? That's very monumental. The first time he had an opportunity, and my sister was with him.
Right.
Can you tell the story?
So this is how the things that he was saying is like they would ask him, he would explain that hunger is painful, hunger hurts. You're thinking about hunger, your food all the time. They would give you soup, you would stand online for soup, and if you got there first online, it was more watery. But if you got there later online, it was a little thicker, but you had the chance that there wasn't going to be any left. And they gave him one bowl of soup, and if you missed it, you don't eat for another 24 hours. And he remembers that he was shaking so much that the person who was doling it out for him got impatient and smacked him, and then his soup hit the ground, and then he didn't have food for another 24 hours. So in Auschwitz, that's more or less, he was doing those works, those kind of jobs, and living in the barracks. One story that he told us when he got to Auschwitz, it was Shavuos, and all of the men entered the barracks, and these are guys that were from his town and religious, and they said, it's a Shavuot, we didn't daven yet. So they started davening, and then when they got to the part of Asher Bachat Banu Mikol Ha'amim, there was one fellow that started screaming, because it's saying, and God, you chose us amongst the nations. When we say that in our tefillah, it's because he chose us among the nations to be his nation for good. So this fellow was screaming to God, this is what you chose us for, this is what you chose us for. But everybody was so afraid, they forced him to be quiet, and they jumped on him, quiet, because they didn't know at what point they were going to come and kill them for something like this. So, and then also through the time that my father was in Auschwitz from Shavuot until January 18th. So it was from the beginning of June until January 18th. During that time, my father would put on tefillin. You want the tefillin story?
Yes. So there was one pair of tefillin in Auschwitz. Somehow, how did it even get there? Like somebody, I don't know. There was one pair of tefillin, and all the boys knew about this, and they would wait online starting at 3 o'clock in the morning to have an opportunity to put on tefillin. Like you can imagine, first of all, the risk of waiting online to put on tefillin.
In the middle of the night.
That they, in the middle of the night, they're starving and they don't have enough sleep, but will do anything to have an opportunity to put on tefillin. And Daddy used to say the story
and
that
if you caught,
You'll be killed. You'll be killed. And he said, he remembers he would put it on and he wouldn't even have had a chance to say Shema or anything.
Right,
The bracha, and the
you had
guy
to take it
already
off
is
out.
pulling. The next guy is pulling him to take it off.
Right.
And
And so this was an amazingly poignant story that he told his grandchildren to make sure they put in tefillin, because
how important
Right,
it is.
how
And
important
the
it
boys
is.
that he went for
Right.
in Yeshivat Kotel
Uh-huh.
understood the significance
Right.
and like when you how much he treasured it when he wasn't able to do it freely, he would do anything.
And there was also something very interesting that he said. Now you have to imagine this is an excruciating, they're suffering tremendously, emotionally suffering, physically suffering, and you're not supposed to put tefillin on at night. You're only supposed to put it on in the daytime.
Daylight.
But in the daylight. But the only time they can put it on was at night. So they had this kind of, like, I don't know what the word is, like sort of combative love relationship with God. And he said that when they put this tefillin on, it's like almost, oh really? You're gonna like,
So they were
oh
people
God,
that
they're saying, God, you're gonna tell me when I can put tefillin on?
Right.
Oh
There were
really?
people that started yelling at them.
You know?
There were people that started yelling, "What are you doing putting on tefillin? It's dark. You can't put on the tefillin in the dark. You think you're doing a mitzvah, you're not doing a mitzvah." So there were people that would argue back, saying, "Really? I'm going to put on the tefillin when I want to put on the tefillin. Hashem didn't ask me if I want to be in Auschwitz. Hashem didn't ask me. Even I heard my father say this. You hear people say, Hashem didn't ask me if I wanted my wife killed by Germans. I'm going to put on the tefillin when I want to put on the tefillin."
Right.
Which was a difficult psychological thing to understand, that people felt it was necessary for their
It's incredible.
faith.
Right.
It shows such enormous strength and
Strength and
devotion and faith.
Right.
And even when they're questioned, they won't
Right.
give it up.
Like, I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you when I'll decide make these decisions, like in spite of that, in spite of the rule.
Yeah, so that was some of the
And
stories.
you got a picture. You got a new speech.
And his speech.
I'll send Les some other
Do you
things.
know if they'd set it to feeling if it survived?
I don't know. Because he went from there, he went on the death march.
Okay.
This is January the 18th.
Yeah, January 18th he went on the death march. And they started January 18th in Poland. So he didn't have a warm coat, a down coat, a nice hat. But what they did was they ripped bags from the bags of cement. They took the pieces of cement and they stuffed it in their pajamas because it gave it like warmth, like layers of things. And that's what they
They
had.
weren't even allowed to do that.
They weren't allowed to do that.
Like shot for even doing this.
Yeah.
But
But he said that when it started raining, then the cement would stick to your
right.
skin.
No, it gets hard, and it was like almost comical. Oh, so there is some sort of black comedy that my father would always point out. When they were waiting to they were all like after the shower and they're waiting to get their uniforms. Here they are. They have no idea what's waiting for them. This is an insane situation. They don't know. They know that somehow they're able to experience the smell of death. But here they are being thrown uniforms to put on. And so like a fat man got a skinny uniform and a skinny man got a fat uniform. And so they were like trading, the uniforms were flying. You have a fat one, you have a skinny one, and back and forth. And my father said it was a comedic, it was
They were laughing.
a funny moment within, like when there is like the humor, like you hear about like dark humor, like black humor.
But there was, because these were the stories my father would explain to the boys, that even during very horrific
And that
time.
humor maybe kept them human, a bit
Yeah,
human.
human. It kept them alive. The laughter.
Right.
The laughter
Right.
kept them alive another
Right.
day.
Exactly.
And then and then another story that my father would say that was also black humor is when they had to lie on the barracks. The barracks they were just boards of different levels. It wasn't straight, and there were so many of them pushed in that they couldn't lie on their back. They had to lie on their side, and they were like squashed like sardines. So if somebody turned around, you've heard that. So if somebody turned around to lie on their right side, then everybody else had to turn around. Otherwise, you're face to face, and you can't. So so then there were 3 levels, and you wanted to be on the top level, because what would happen is that sometimes somebody would have to relieve themselves. But once you leave this lineup of sleeping, once you go out, if you have to relieve yourself and go out, you can't get back in. You have to just like sleep on the floor or something. So people would relieve themselves, and then the liquid would be falling down to the people below. And he remembers that people were screaming on the lower levels in Yiddish, I'm being pished on, and then people would yell back, "No, it's rain! It's rain!
It's like a warm shower.
It's a warm shower! It's a warm shower!" And they would like laugh, and they would say, so, and then they would have a bit of laughter even in that situation. So my father does have a very good sense of humor, and I can see that was something that would keep him and the other young guys. He was 16, a 16-year-old kid put in hell. So so we don't have any photos of we.
Well, you know what? Let's talk about that first night when he was in that barracks we always take a picture in front of. I think I remembered Daddy telling us that they hung a young boy.
Right. Well, I don't think it was the first night, but I think it was one of the times that they were walking through.
That they hung a young boy.
And he saw it.
Yeah, he saw it.
Because he did something. He stole something, a piece of food or something.
A child, and he was saying Shema Yisrael. He said last words were Shema Yisrael, and then they kicked the thing. So this is, So every year, that my father would go back to Auschwitz, he would insist on taking a picture with the boys from Yeshivat HaKotel, and everybody should stand in front with a smile.
In this building, the building number 16.
His barracks. And we would go there every single year.
We have the photo here. So my father, when he was there, the first time he went, and from there, here's a picture of the building. This was in Auschwitz I, where they have the administrative buildings. And my father was sent to this building number 16. And my father remembers 16 because he remembers that he was 16 years old and the address is 16. So every year he goes with the boys, and this is a group of boys he's with here, and he asks that they photograph, they take a picture with all of them together with their Israeli flags, with my father in front of building 16. And my father always says he wants everyone to smile, because this is his nitzachon, his victory. He was 16 years old and he didn't believe he would get to his 17th birthday. And in these photos he has with these boys, he was somewhere between the ages of 81 and 91 is when he went to Auschwitz all those years. And so everybody's supposed to smile. And even today, now my father stopped joining the trip for the last few years, but the guy that was with him sends us a picture every year of the boys smiling in front of building 16, because it's an Am Yisrael Chai photo.
Year they do that.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
And can I ask, when did your father and your mother first discuss with you when you were growing up? Did they ever discuss with you?
Yeah. So I was the youngest, and my older sisters are 10 and 11 years older than me. So I was very young, so they would discuss it. So I knew from my own personal thing, I knew from a very young age, because I would hear them talking about it. I was 6 6 years old, 7 years old, when I heard everybody had been gassed and cremated.
Did you hear this from your parents?
From the conversation. From the conversation. But but Daddy wanted to discuss it more, right?
Right. So when you wanted to tell us about what happened in the Shoah, my father wanted to discuss it more. He wanted to tell us more. My mother, as I explained, my mother was so traumatized, and she seemed to control the conversation. So anytime my father would bring it up, she would object, get out, like, I can't do it, I can't stand it.
She didn't want us to hear. She didn't want us, her children, to suffer from the trauma that they did.
Yes, she couldn't. Yeah. She needed to control the conversation. However, my mother alone would tell us, okay, as long as it was coming from her, and so I was a child too, a very young child, when I heard about what happened to my family, and my that they took the child. My mother was carrying her niece, and that Mengele told her to give the child to the mother. And this was something that was very painful for my sister, and she had to give the child to her mother, her sister, and then she lived, and her niece and her sister were sent to the gas chambers. And my mother would talk about this child all the time. She would talk about how beautiful this child was. So the difference between my parents is this. My mother was not able to compartmentalize her grief. It was out there and wild. Like, she would just, like, once in a while she'd just say things, and But my father was able to be like a more detached. It was like a compartmentalization of it, like to be like, now I'll tell you the story, but then after the story's finished, let's go live a great life. Let's go be happy. My father was always very cheery. He was the one to to live life. Whereas my mother lived a life of severe deprivation. She was like, you say, like the classic Holocaust survivor. She never allowed herself any pleasure. She was always like
except for children.
Except for her children.
No.
Well, that's true. Except for
not like she
nobody don't have to complete, right? No, but she didn't want to eat. Yeah, she didn't want to give herself any pleasure. Even like she would just eat what she needed to eat. She wouldn't be interested in beautiful clothing or beautiful, delicious food or something like that. But to her children, she adored taking care of us and loving us and having us have good things. But for herself, personal deprivation, she
you think she felt guilty that she survived?
Yeah, well, we were trying to. Like when we were younger, we didn't understand what it was. Now we understand more that clearly this is how she was able to survive every single day. Every single day, how did she raise us? Just experiencing what she experienced, and losing her entire family, having people die around her, having everything. How did she manage to get up in the morning? And I guess maybe she did this because this way she was able to control her life, having control. Like, I'm not interested in this, and she was, she was very. My mother also, which is really interesting. My mother loved certain things. She loved like nature, and loved music, and loved dance. And so when those things were available to us or something, she loved it, and she would sing the Blue Danube, a symphony to us, so that we could dance ballet. And she was like, right. So she her heart, she was very emotional about these things. You're very emotionally connected to these things, but it was in a more like a wild form. My father, do you understand? My father was able to just
tell her and detach. Yeah. But it didn't affect how my mother lived her life, because what she didn't allow herself things, and we saw that if there was anything that needed to be bought, she would buy it for us, and things like that.
If there any literal deprivation, self-deprivation.
But no limit on fun.
Did she ever join your father on the trips back to
because she didn't. it was a trip for the boys, and my mother had said many times she never wants to go back there. When I think of my mother's Holocaust stories, I don't imagine any laughter. You know, and my father's I do. So with my mother, she did tell us things. But when she saw that it was getting painful, then she would stop, and she would stop herself because she didn't want us to suffer from what she wanted. I mean,
so it looked to us. You see, it looked to us that she didn't have this she was cold in that area. Only later on we found out what happened to her, because she had a diary that she wrote that when she was liberated, and after she was liberated, all the girls sat down and wrote up their diaries, their stories. And my mother wrote a diary that was as if it was happening in real time. She was able to sit down and actually do that. And she wrote this incredible diary in Hungarian. And we never had it translated. We knew that it existed in this like weird kind of Hungarian script that she kept under her mattress.
You still have the diary?
Well, then you can...
Well, we had it translated. We had it translated into English, and it was remarkable with feelings of what went on and how she suffered, and of hope and prayers that she
things
wrote.
we never knew before.
Prayers that she wrote, and that she wasn't giving up, and she had tremendous faith in Hashem. And then
which was a very big surprise for us, because we didn't, like my mother seemed to be so angry at God. My mother was so angry at God.
A big believer in God, but angry at him.
Yes, exactly. You know, if there's a God, I'm really angry. You know what I mean? Like
because
this
of
because
like yes. So with,
how could he have done this? And so we didn't know that she had these spiritual feelings.
Yes, she
remained religious.
And your father's always religious, always kept the minhag. They both kept the minhag.
Yes, they were both very a strong Zionist religious. We call them, you know, here Dati Leumi, very strong
It's also
modern
interesting
Orthodox.
because coming from Satmar, it wasn't so Zionist.
Well, that's part of
his. He left. He.
That's part of his story. You want to tell a little about the.
So I could just. So they. Would you like me to go back to like when he went from Auschwitz to the Death March?
So that's.
We'll wrap that up a little bit. The Death March started on January 18th, and they marched them in the freezing cold, and alongside, on both sides of the road, he passed tens of thousands of frozen women, dead women.
Right.
He realized they emptied the women's camp before they emptied the men's camp, and marching, and if anybody would trail behind, they would be shot. And he would just like keep walking and walking and walking. And then with no food, and then he got to telling a shortened version of the story. He got to a place called Gleiwitz, and there was some sort of structure like a large barn, and he saw that people were inside, and he saw outside everybody was dead and frozen outside. So he realized that he had to get in. He had to get in there because otherwise he'll freeze to death. So he tried, the doors were blocked because it was really, people were squashed in there. So he saw that there was a window, and he broke the window, and he started climbing in, and then people were trying to throw him out because there was no room, but he fought his way and he went in there. And lucky he did, as he says, because he's here to tell us the story.
If he wouldn't have broken the window.
No, he would have been
frozen. From the frozen bodies.
One of the frozen bodies.
Yeah, so they're saying they didn't have coats. They didn't equip them with anything.
This is the heart of winter.
Right. Yes, in January, February, beginning of January.
And he also tells us a story about when they put him in these, there are cattle cars without a roof. So it's just halfway up. It's sort of like...
Right, from Gleiwitz, they took them the rest of the way. Go ahead.
Right, took them away. And I think you started out with like 150 boys in this space. No roof. So you're going in the wintertime, the wind is blowing, and the rule was you cannot pick your head up.
If your head goes above the top rail of the cart, then they shoot you.
Right. So the people he'd be talking to some guy, and then he realizes
the guy's not paying attention for a second. Then he sees
he's not paying attention, and it's bullet in his head.
Wow, why did they do that?
Because they didn't want you to pick their head up. They don't know why they had that particular. And then they were starting.
Maybe they were hiding. When you think about that, maybe because they didn't want anyone to see what they were transporting.
Maybe they didn't want the local people to see.
Yes, right. They were transporting the people. So in this group of boys that my father was in, it was so freezing. that they started at 150 people, and there are people who just dying, dropping dead. And they would throw them overboard. And at the end, there were only 15 left.
15.
From the whole train.
From his cart, from his,
15.
where they stuffed in 150 of
And
them.
my father always says, "Don't ask me how I survived." That's what my father always said. Don't ask me. He has no idea.
But he said
No
he ate
idea.
the snow. So
Yeah.
he says, the snow must have some kind of minerals in it because that's all I ate. And then when they were passing through Czechoslovakia, sometimes there were overpasses and there were people that threw bread down to them. But he never fought for it because he didn't want to be involved in fighting for the bread because it was very ugly, you know, and you could get hurt and punched to get that bread. So he didn't fight for it, but he ate the snow.
My father was always very dignified. You know, my father is, it's interesting that he was also said the miracle is that he was never beaten. Never beaten in Auschwitz. Never beaten his entire experience, which is
rare.
Which is very rare. So my father somehow just like learned how to survive and to learn, you know, it's interesting, both my parents were very, like, they're opposites. My mother was an incredible rebel. My mother was going to show the Nazis who was boss, basically. She was incredible spirit that we found out only later. We didn't know these things. She didn't share these stories. You know, so we found out later about her incredible heroism in the face of death, but she didn't care. She was going to show them, and so she was constantly beaten. And so my mother survived because, and she, not only that, because she also, there's a wonderful story, if you want to tell a story about the water story, about mommy carrying the water, just to give you an idea of how my mother was so bold, and she didn't care about the consequences. She survived because she didn't follow the rules, and my father survived because he did.
Yeah.
This is what the amazing thing is, truly.
Yes, my mother would fight for the food. My mother would fight for that piece of bread. Her cousin wrote a book. My mother's first cousin wrote a book, and she dedicated a chapter to my mother, Shifra. And in the chapter, one of the stories that she tells is that in Auschwitz they weren't given any water at a certain point, and they were dying of thirst. And my mother told her cousin that she's going to go find water, and her cousin said, "They'll kill you. You're not allowed to leave the barracks." So my mother said, "Either I'll die slowly from dying from thirst, or I'll die fast from a bullet, but I'm going to get water." So she left the barracks and went to look for water, and then her cousin writes that she remembers seeing something she can never believe. She sees my mother coming back after many hours, cupping her hands together with water in it, and instead of running quickly to avoid any of the Germans seeing her, she's going as slow as she can so not a drop of water falls from her hands.
Amazing.
And she gave it to her cousin to drink from this water. And her cousin drank every last drop up from her hand, and she said it brought her back to life. And whenever Shifra, my mother, would see that the men threw bread over to the women's side, women would fight for it. My mother would go fight for it and grab a piece, and whatever she brought back, she shared half and half with her cousin Goldie, because Goldie herself would always say that she herself was too timid. She wasn't going to go search for water or fight for bread. But my mother would do that and always share it with her. So that was my mom's spirit, and then thank God. And then in Buchenwald, there was starvation. My father had to go into the big dumpsters where they had, and he remembers eating the most delicious rotten cabbage. He says it tasted like sauerkraut, but there were rats in the dumpster also, and he had to fight off the rats. He says the chutzpah of these rats that taking his food. And that he would eat he remembers the delicious rotten cabbage because he was so starving. So yeah, he said if Auschwitz was bad, Buchenwald was the worst hell.
Even worse.
Worse than Auschwitz. because it was pure starvation. It was pure starvation there. They did not have food. And then
When we would talk about,
and then he was liberated.
How long was
when we talk about
he in
Antonin,
Buchenwald?
He was there from the beginning of February until liberation of April 28th.
And does your dad remember the Liberation Day?
Oh, when my father tells the story, he tells the story with days of the week.
right.
We arrived in this date. It was a Tuesday. We stayed Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday,
Right.
and then
Yes.
I have those recordings of him, how he describes it. The days of the week were very relevant to them. It wasn't, he kept order in his mind. My father's an organized person.
And he knew when Shabbat was?
He always knew when Shabbat was, for sure, but he could even recall what day of the week whatever special event happened, he knew what day of the week, when the death march started, when the liberation was, and then at the end, he was liberated.
You want to tell us about Antonin?
Oh, yes.
This is a wonderful story.
You know the story about
No,
Siggy?
you can just tell the story. It's okay. I'll put it in.
What's his
Antonin Kalina.
So my father was in Buchenwald with some very special people, with Rabbi Lau. Yisrael Meir Lau was only 8 years old and was in Buchenwald with him, and Eli Wiesel was in Buchenwald with him also, and they were in the youth block. The block was 66. Block 66. Different books were written about the boys from Buchenwald. And anyway, so there was Block 66. So at the end of the war, the Germans knew that there was going to be the liberation, and so they tried to kill as many Jews as possible before the camp was liberated. So they would call all the Jews to come out, and come out, and they would kill them. Now there was
The youth block was established by this guy, though.
So there was a Czechoslovakian political prisoner,
Antonin Kalina.
Anthony Kalina. He wasn't Jewish. He was a political prisoner, and he was in charge of their block, and he took care of these boys. And he told the boys, nobody leave the block, nobody leave the barracks. And the story that's told after that is that he went to the German officer involved, and he said, the liberation is going to be, I will testify that you did not kill these boys, you let them live, if you change the records that they're not Jewish. And it seems that was the story that happened, and because of that, the boys from Block 66 lived, and Anthony Colin became a righteous Gentile, and he was a political person in Czechoslovakia. He had some prestigious, but we only found the story out afterwards. Actually, I think only his son, if I'm not mistaken, we could check that his son got the award for him posthumously.
See, we didn't have, when we were younger, my father said that there was no one to really speak to about the Holocaust. It was the publication of Elie Wiesel's book, A Night, that opened up the space to discuss it.
Right.
Because when my father came out when he was speaking to people in the United States, they had no concept of the horror they were in. That my father would give an example, like they'd say, so in Auschwitz, did you make Kiddush on wine or grape juice? Or like they wanted these questions.
There's no concept.
No concept, exactly. And there was no one to talk to. There was like, we're living in a parallel universe, so there was like no one to.
Except there other Holocaust friends.
Yeah, they're Holocaust friends, and that's who their friends were.
We grew up, all my parents' friends were survivors.
And did your father keep a close contact with Rabbi Lau and Elie Wiesel?
Well, Elie Wiesel, yes. Rabbi Lau came to Israel, and my father went to America. So after the liberation, my father was in France with both of them, and with Elie Wiesel, he shared a room. Actually, they moved them from Paris to Taverny, where they separated.
This is a picture.
You
can see this picture. This is in France. Okay, the little orange strip is pointing to my father, and and Elie Wiesel is in this picture too. And also there was another very big rabbi, Menashe Klein, who was in this. They're all from the youth bloc in Buchenwald. We can identify, I'm not quite sure. Do you know who's everybody here?
Well, Elie
is-
Wiesel is, I'm sorry, let's see, which is Elie.
So they were in contact.
Which
But,
is Elie Wiesel, Daddy?
Mhm.
That's not
Yeah,
Elie
that looks
Wiesel?
like Elie. Could be Elie Menashe. No, is that Menashe Klein or Elie Wiesel?
There's your, here.
Moshe Bear. Oh, Bear.
Relative, Moshe Bear.
Moshe
Okay.
Bear, who's
Now let's
the
look for
that was
Elie
called the
Wiesel.
Payaruv. He's a big rabbi
No, he's not.
who actually set up my parents, who actually introduced them, because they were very religious. When they came to the United
Oh.
States, they had to be set.
So Elie Wiesel is in the big picture.
Oh, in the big picture, I
We have that
we have these
So my
pictures.
father, after that, came to America. And,
But you want to talk about liberation?
oh, the liberation, yeah.
Okay, he had, my father did say some very funny story, because again, there's a lot of black humor. The story that when they were, the night before, he broke into the garbage and he ate some raw potatoes, right? He ate some, I'm not going to ask you, Daddy, I'm not going to ask you. I just know the story because I heard it many times. And he ate some raw potatoes and wasn't feeling well, it just obviously, you know, that goes through your system. And then they had to march out of Buchenwald, and I guess they were going to be shot, who knows what. But suddenly he just couldn't move anymore. He just couldn't, that was it. He knew he couldn't move, and he fell to the ground and he was motionless. And he heard people around him say in German or Yiddish, er ist tot, which means he's dead. So he was thinking, oh, I'm dead. Oh, is this what dead, this is what it feels like, I must be dead. He had no idea, can you imagine? Must be death. And he heard them like bringing a wheelbarrow over, and they were going to put him into the wheelbarrow because take him to the crematorium. And then suddenly they were like I guess some sirens went off, or the airplanes were going above the airplanes. I guess there was American like fighter jets finally showing up, and they all panicked. They started dispersing. Everyone started running around, and suddenly my father just
Jumps up and starts running.
came to and just gets up and just running. And he says that the people were saying, "What? Come back here! You're dead!" You know what I mean? That was the job for them to take him to the crematorium. Anyway, so he tells that story always like with this humor.
Yeah, also
Very
how he
good.
remembers it in a funny way.
Right.
Anyway, you can see that being funny. And then after the liberation, he was very sick for a few days, and then
Does he remember that they gave a lot of food when they liberated?
yeah, he was too sick to eat.
Yes,
food.
he was too
So
sick.
that in a way could have saved
Saved
his
life.
life.
Right, exactly. Those potatoes.
Yeah,
Those
because
rotten
the-
potatoes.
Because
that
so
they
many
were too
people
sick.
ate
They died.
so much of the rich food.
And they
Their
died.
bodies couldn't.
Right. They didn't give it to them slowly. He was too sick to eat a lot, so that also saved him. And he had the chaplain. He was liberated by the American Army, and the chaplain was Rabbi Schachter. And Rabbi Schachter helped him find an address of where his family could be in America. Right.
And his father, his grandfather, Yosef Rabenstein, moved with his wife Blima and most of their children to the United States. Probably what was it, 1920s, something like that.
So he had a grandfather in America.
In Yonkers, New York, and so they were able to locate him and then arrange. And then this is my great grandfather, my father's grandfather, Joseph. Was able to contact my father's father, who was then living in Brooklyn, Moshe Weiser, who was living in Brooklyn, to say your son is alive. And
That's
yeah,
that's how they found out.
that's how I
alive.
found that he was alive.
Your grandfather, did he remain all the time in Auschwitz, or did he also go
No,
to the
he
march?
never. He was in
The
the
grandfather,
States.
he went to America before the war for
Before the war.
work, and he didn't come back because of the war. And then
I see.
he
He went before.
He missed the entire war in
War.
America. In the United
my father's father.
Right,
But
and
my-
he couldn't rescue his family.
And it was also not only my father's father, if you see that picture that we showed you before, my father's father, not only his wife and his children, it was all his sisters and his parents.
He lost
everybody in his immediate family while he was in America. So he suffered from it emotionally. He was definitely a victim of the Shoah emotionally.
He was never whole, never whole.
Does your father ever speak to you about his interaction when he reconnected with his father?
Yes.
That must have been
It was very-
so emotional. So
It was
difficult, but
it was
very emotional.
a mixed situation because
Because my grandfather was very, very religious, very Satmar, and he was emotionally completely traumatized. He lost the amount of guilt he must have. He lost absolutely everyone, his entire family.
And he couldn't help him.
He couldn't do anything. He tried, couldn't do anything. The shock and to see my father. So
my father
he
wrote
was
a letter about it. My father wrote a letter when my father was in Paris. He wrote a very detailed letter about everything that happened.
He told him what happened.
And so my father many times in the recent years, he said that he felt that letter may have put his father over the edge. So my father is carrying that around with him also. So because he didn't know what the way that the Americans didn't know what was actually happening, he didn't know to what extent. So to what extent happened to his family. So it was the one surviving relative of my father. So he would come to our house, but there was a level of estrangement because he was also Satmar Chassid, and we were modern Orthodox.
Right, and also my father and his father were separated since he was 8 or 9 years old.
Yes, he was in the States for
They didn't have a relationship since he was a little boy. He remembers him very fondly. When I used to ask my father about that, he remembers him but since he was 8, he didn't see him, and then they saw him after the war when.
And did he ever remarry?
He did for a short while, but it didn't work.
He was not emotionally available.
Yeah,
he was very much. He would take, I think, refuge probably in it was very much of intellectual, Jewish intellectual, and he had his different projects, intellectual projects, and.
But it was emotionally.
And did you manage to see your grandfather?
Yes, he would come to our house, and he was very affectionate with us. But because of the difference of that we weren't Haredi.
Yeah, there was very. Yeah, it wasn't like a liberal kind. It was. They were just. This is it, or that you're with us or against us. And it was
right.
It was a hard. It was a hard.
So that caused a problem. But he was. Maybe the youngest also. Maybe he was. I remember. He was always happy to see me.
Right. He would give us like Smith Brothers cough drops, cherry cough drops.
He would give us
right. And that was exactly.
Candies,
remember, anxiety would give us cough drops. That was wonderful. But that's.
Right.
Yeah, it wasn't like one of these cozy grandpa kind of.
Unfortunately,
my father is
the coziest grandfather,
the best grandfather,
and we'll tell you that story.
He is the grandfather, the icon of the most wonderful grandfather
and great grandfather,
and great grandfather ever had.
You're the best grandpa.
Yeah, I was.
So I'll just tell you one last story about Buchenwald, which was the beginning of my father's decision to leave the Satmar fold and the anti-Zionism. In Buchenwald, he saw that all the nations were coming to pick up their nationals, like the French for the French and the Italian, because there were a lot of political prisoners in Buchenwald also. But nobody came for the Jews. The Jews were left behind. So him and all the young Jewish men there, whoever was survived, they said, we have a country. And they pulled branches from the tree, and they took a white rag and a blue rag, and they tied white and blue together on a rag, and they would make a parade and say, we have a country, we're going to Palestine. Don't forget, it was 1948, and Israel was called Palestine.
And Jews were Palestinians.
And Jews were Palestinians. And then we are going to Palestine. And from that story that I've heard growing up was definitely put me in the direction of Israel. We have a country now, not in 1945.
And when we would go every single year to Poland. So Marilyn and I would go. We'd sometimes go together. Sometimes we'd take turns. But
my father went with the school.
The school to
the company.
Yes. So we would be in this, thing. It would be so. It was very obviously it was a very enriching but traumatic experience. But seeing how close we were to Israel, that if this can never happen with our Air Force now. And I loved when they used to have flyovers of Auschwitz. Like I would feel it would be.
Right.
It was just so amazing. Anyway,
So my father, with each child, with each grandchild, and with each great-grandchild, he would say he has the four nuns. Nun, nitzachon, victory, nichama, comfort from the children and grandchildren, nikama, revenge, and nachat. And then we added pleasure. Yes, and nachat means pleasure. So it's revenge, victory, comfort, and pleasure from his children. And then we added the fifth nun, the letter nun, for ninim, when he had great-grandchildren.
Right. And we have...
And I'll show you a photo here. This is every year my father would
facilitate us all getting us together in some unlucky hotel for them, lucky for us. And we would come from all corners of the world to get together to be with our family. And it is...
this is it. Here, Daddy, I'm
it's really
showing you this
special
photo.
because the children...
Yeah.
I mean, there are some more people that...
This is 2019, so it's 4 years and more marriages and more children and grandchildren. And here's my mother and my father. And you see, Daddy, see the picture from the back. When my father proposed to my mother who was also a survivor and lost everyone in her immediate family, my father said to her, I have nothing, I have Gornish. You have nothing, you have Gornish. Maybe together we'll make something. And this is what
this is. Exactly. And so this is my father's legacy. And the cousins.
And the great-grandchildren.
And all are
amazing.
Beautiful, really wonderful, warm, and connected, very connected family.
Very connected family because my father encouraged the connections between all the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And they have, we're up to number... I think it's 64 descendants.
Right. Okay. And we have 4 generations in Israel. 4 generations in Israel, and
all of the great-grandchildren live in Israel.
And when did your parents come to Israel?
1985. It took them. My father says he had to make a stop in America for 40 years.
For 40 years, exactly.
Because he actually had a certificate to come to Israel. In order to move to Israel, during that time, you needed a certificate. And he had one, but there was another fellow that didn't have a country that would sponsor him. So my father gave him his certificate.
Yeah. I wonder who it is, though.
Because my father was able to go to America because his father was there. His grandfather was in America.
Right. And he has actually his aunt, who had come to America like 20 years as a young child, was in the American Army. She was a WAC, and she came to...
woman of Armed Forces.
Yeah. So she, Aunt Frances, and came to see him in France, and so that's why. But he gave away his past to Israel. I'm almost wondering who came in his place. Who came in his place.
But it just shows his spirit that he's prepared to. It's incredible.
Right, just amazing. We have more pictures. We have some. Just trying to think.
A picture of Daddy and Mommy.
Yeah, so we also have the group picture from, look, this is Tavern picture.
Oh yeah, this is the picture. This was in France after the war with the survivors, a lot of the young boys, the youth.
And with the yellow, that's where your father is. With the
yes, so that's where my father, that's where my father is. And he remembers Rabbi Yisrael Meir Lau. They called him Lulik.
Remember Lulik, Daddy? Lulik.
He spoke Polish. My father recalls that he didn't speak Yiddish.
Yes.
We're not sure why that was, but he would speak in Polish, little Lulik. And he would play ball with him.
Lulik, from the Lulik, Rabbi Lau, Lulik. Right, they called him Lulik. And they would say, because he didn't speak Yiddish, they thought it was like a little shegitzel, and say, this is a little boy, he's not Jewish. So it's obviously that. See, that didn't last. Oh, here's, trying to think. We
Yeah,
had more
nice
pictures of
photo of
Mommy. We
Mommy.
had a pic. That was a picture of
I'll find
my.
And in the States, did your parents and most of their friends also survivors?
Yes,
Yes.
their friends were all survivors.
Right. They're very close friends. But we had a few mix-in of some non-survivors for like...
My mommy's and daddy's
yeah,
closest friends were survivors.
Right.
So for me
Right.
also, they couldn't, because of the, it was hard for non-survivors to understand the survivors. But my parents wanted to be very American. They
Right.
only spoke English in the house.
No Yiddish, no Hungarian.
Yiddish, no
which is-
Hungarian.
Not
Only
to themselves?
No, to them, each other.
Yes,
English, only English.
Really? That's
Only
unusual.
English.
In the house, my father wanted us to speak without an accent, to be American, to be like free of like any of the,
Yeah,
like, the
yeah,
Preston's
they were very-
shackles. And so, and that, and unfortunately we don't have a second language, but we also don't, so,
Right.
We
They
have
were
our-
American. But
and very
Okay.
patriotic flag waver. My father was always very grateful for the freedom that, and the liberty that America offered, and he always just say the world doesn't deserve America. He's saying that it's so, he was always very appreciative. A lot of hakaras hatov for the United States. And,
But then in 1985, he was able to really live his dream, and they moved to Israel.
Right.
They came to Malaya Dumim, where they lived until 2010. They lived in Malaya Dumim, and they had a wonderful life there. And then they moved to Efrat for 12 years, where I'm living. And then 2 years ago, they moved to Jerusalem, which was also a dream for my father
Right.
to live in Yerushalayim. But his real dream was to be here in Eretz Israel and have his family come and be
Right.
together here.
And our fourth sister, who lived in America, just made Aliyah 3 weeks
That's
ago.
amazing.
Right. And yes, exactly. So all your 4 daughters are
They
here.
all live here.
Yeah.
They all came here. Yes, it's amazing. And it's from my father's fortitude.
Yes. Out of the
Yeah, it was
64
right.
family members, there are 4 in the States and everybody else is in Israel.
Right. Right, exactly. So it's...
His two, he has 2 great-grandchildren serving so far. The 2 oldest great-grandchildren are in the army.
Right. The great-grandchildren.
Great-grandchildren.
Exactly. So it's 4 generations.
So, does your father know that we're having a war and
Yes,
what's going on?
he knows, but not not the
the-
details.
it's
just
like a
general.
conventional war
He's
details.
davening. He's davening very hard. He's saying he's saying Kaddish for all of Am Yisrael. He goes
Every
to
single
shul in the
morning.
He
Every
goes to
single
Every morning.
He finished saying
Hi.
Kaddish for my mother. Every single morning he said Kaddish for my mother. And my mother's yahrzeit was a few weeks ago. And he asked to continue saying Kaddish because for people who don't have people to say Kaddish for them.
Right.
Right. So,
And did your dad and your mom, did they leave you with a message? What is their main message that they imparted to
Well,
the family?
so I think that Israel was a very big part of my father's message, that this is the place for Jews, and for Jews will be safe around the world as long as we have a strong and secure Israel. And for my mother, also, she was very, very strongly Zionistic, and very, I would say, very like right wing in terms of a strong Israel, not to give in to anything. But her message was enjoy life, have fun, have fun, enjoy life while you're young, have fun, do. Don't spend time being sad or depressed or anything.
right, like exactly.
Yeah.
She didn't want us to be...
She was a
depressed.
wild, fun mother, a grandmother, and great-grandmother. She would do dances with the kids. She was dancing until she was 94.
Right.
And
Until she fell, she was dancing.
yeah,
And then
she was dancing. And danced wild with the kids. My mother was 85 years old, and I would find her under the dining room table hiding with the grandchildren,
Really?
great-grandchildren.
Right.
Yes. Yes.
So in our household, I don't think we were allowed to really be depressed.
Yeah, no,
Right.
can't be depressed.
There's
No, you weren't allowed
no.
to be depressed.
Yeah,
You
like
had to
why
be
would you
happy.
be depressed?
Happy, happy.
Exactly. You had to be happy, you had to be productive. There was no depression, there was no, yeah, exactly. We wouldn't have, some households you have a sympathetic ear. Oh, no. That didn't happen. No,
Right, no,
you had to be like tough and happy. Like,
Right, don't
you
be
get
sad.
up,
Don't be sad.
don't be sad. Yeah, exactly. Like, that's how it is. So, exactly. So it's just interesting philosophy. that to have. It's like a little different than the philosophy of today, you know, how everyone is like a lot of sympathetic ears, but our parents were not like that. They were just...
I want to just get a picture of Mommy.
Oh, that would be nice.
You said let's all just walk down here.
So we just, obviously, we just lost our mother. I wish she'd be here. She would be making jokes.
Wow.
She'd be making jokes, and because she never wanted anyone to be, you know, she never wanted anyone to be sad and to be, you know.
And in the meantime, can I say thank you?
Oh yes.
I'm just going to say something very special.
Oh my goodness.
I am so grateful. See, I'm so grateful to you. There are no words to tell you how I appreciate being in your home and meeting your lovely daughters and hearing the most amazing, incredible, there are no words. Really, there are no words. Your story is just incredible beyond belief. And I'm extremely grateful to a friend of mine, Bruce Chatterton, who made this all happen. So if I can just mention a little bit what happened here. In 2010, in South Africa, I was the commissioner from Israel to South Africa for a stamp exhibition. It was a World Stamp Exhibition. And New Zealand, one of the exhibits was Descent into the Abyss, about the Shoah. And I couldn't believe what I was seeing. There was a whole exhibit on the Holocaust by Bruce Chatterton. So I went to the commissioner, Jenny Bannisfeld, and I said, Jenny, by any chance is Bruce Jewish? They said, no, he's not Jewish, but he lives in New Zealand. And I managed to get his contact details, and I spoke to him. And he sent me the exhibit. And we managed to get his exhibit published in the Society of Israel Philately in this book.
So that's
and now it's open to the public. And what's amazing what he did, a non-Jew in New Zealand, he collects in the whole story of it's called Descent into the Abyss, the history of the Shoah, and he collects postal history and stamps about the Shoah, and he found letters, but he did something even more. He wanted to know what happened to the people in the letters. So he did the research, and he found, and it's on the cover of his book. This is your
cover.
story.
See, this went to your went to your uncle, and this is story. It's very poignant, Daddy. That was a letter. There was a letter that sent from your uncle to Elazar Weiser, your grandfather.
Yeah.
And so it's very heartbreaking.
It's incredible what he
his
did.
end was he was.
But what Bruce did is something unique as well. And I met with Bruce in Thailand this year. There was a World Stamp exhibition, and he's been in my home. And he told me that he went to your flat and he met with you.
Yes. And we had lunch in Yerushalayim, and we had photos.
Yes,
I'm so grateful,
special.
and that it's the cover of the book. I think it is such a great honor, which you so deserve. And your story is the story of Am Yisrael. It's incredible, and I'm so grateful to you all, to both of you, to Marilyn and to Barbara and Siggy. You should just be Amei Stream in good health, Mazel and Brocha, and Bemet Daraba and Kol Halev. I'm so grateful.
And it's so interesting that we ended up coming to you through Bruce. What happened was a number of years ago, the way I got to Bruce Chatterton was a number of years ago, before Googling and internet was so big. I mean, you could search for something, but I asked my father if there's anybody he would like to know about, because now we could write an email to the Holocaust Museum, let's say in America, and so he asked, he said, I don't know what happened, I never heard anything about what happened to my Aunt Bela. So we gave it was Bela, Weiser, and the last names, and we put it in as a question for the United States Holocaust Museum. A few months later, I get an email from a gentleman whose name is Bruce Chatterton, and he said, I don't know anything about your aunt that you're looking for, but I have a postcard that's made out to a Weiser laser in Satmar from someone whose last name is Grunfeld. Is it possible that these could be your relatives? So I was completely astonished. I wrote back asking, "Dear Mr. Chatterton, are you a relative of mine? And and you live in New Zealand, and and so he explains to me what he does. And of course I also asked him, are you Jewish? Like his fascination with Holocaust mail. And so he explained to me what he does. And then he told us about the book. And he asked if he could keep the original postcard as his exhibition, and my father said certainly. And he told us about more. He asked more about the family and what was written in the postcard. So, and then through Bruce in New Zealand, I ended up meeting Les Glassman from Jerusalem.
It's incredible. So in Cape Town, Bruce actually got a gold medal for this exhibition, for his exhibit, and he exhibited this also in Tel Aviv. It was in Israel.
Jerusalem.
Yeah, it was in Jerusalem. It was in
Mhm.
Jerusalem. And he's done so well with it. And today Bruce is a judge.
Oh, really?
So he's a philatelic judge, and we spent such good time together. When we were in Thailand, my wife is very friendly with Bruce and his partner, and it was just incredible. And he spent a Shabbat in our home. He came to visit us as
That's
well.
amazing.
Wonderful.
That's wonderful.
But it's like a circle from 2010.
Yeah,
how wonderful.
Yeah, that's amazing. Oh, wow. So he he is a judge in general.
He's a philatelic judge.
Oh,
And very well respected, and he now
Mm-hmm.
represents Australia internationally, and he was a judge in Thailand.
Oh my goodness.
And it's just, I have a very close connection.
Well,
And
we
I'm
have to
so
thank him. We have
grateful
to, I
because-
thank him so much because this was, we have obviously a wealth of history, but this was a piece that we could never have imagined. It was a very personal piece because this is like, again, because as children we heard the general stories. And so we knew like our little thing about our family. If anyone out of like my father's tiny little orbit, if it's a 16-year-old boy, he didn't know that much. This was such a poignant letter that you can read through the lines because it's like somebody who's like sort of pleading, can't even say the truth.
Touching your history.
Right,
Our
and
history.
and
You're begging
see
us,
his-
to find if he could get out
If he could
of
get
the
out.
Buchenwald ghetto. But it was written 2 months before he was killed in
Right.
the Buchenwald ghetto. My father remembers hearing that his uncle was killed because he was involved in trying to get rabbinic figures out of Poland. And he was shot doing this. And so my father knew that story, but so for him to see the postcard that his uncle had written.
And did you ever know that this postcard existed?
No, of course not.
So Bruce said he found it on eBay. He bought it on eBay. So
That's incredible.
that was
Right.
incredible. Yeah, that was very incredible.
And to see like it was
writing and
it was addressed to our great grandfather. For us, we have
father's father.
we have nobody.
My father's grandfather,
We don't
right.
have anything. Everything was taken away. We don't
Right.
have that kind of legacy. I never met my great grandfather, my great grandmother. We don't. So for us to even see like a letter addressed to him, it makes us. It's like a piece of him here. And what Bruce did
Brings it
was
to
give
life.
us. Yeah, gives it
But
to
I'll tell
life.
you what Bruce did is also very unique, and most philatelists will have the cover and they'll
Yes.
write a bit where it went, the registration or the postmarks, the stamps, but he went in to find out who the people were in the cover, and that makes it so incredibly special.
Right, right, and
And
was
the research, not only the research, but he has such devotion and such interest in what he's doing. It's unbelievable.
Right. So
right.
wonderful.
Yeah.
We're so grateful. We're so grateful. That's so nice. What an amazing contribution. You must be such a sensitive
Well, you know
soul
what, your
to look
parents
into the
really
story.
deserve it, and I think the story of your parents is just something like there are no words really, and I'm
Thank you.
extremely grateful to you.
Thank
I
you.
have a photo of my mother.
Yeah, where was...
Here. I have
Oh,
here.
I'm going to show you some pictures of my mom.
Here, I just took a photo out to show, but here, I'll take this one out.
We actually have a beautiful painting that was part of an exhibition. Yeah,
Is it
It is
swinging?
magnificent.
my mother.
Wow, they look so youthful as well.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. And then
And so happy.
yeah.
Right.
Yes. And you see, this was my mother posing.
Had she been raised in a modern family and had Hitler not come to power, my mother was multi-talented, an extraordinary artist and dancer and singer. She was talented in every area.
Yeah, I can show you some funny pictures because I told you my mother's having fun. You see here.
I can't believe it. And she would go under the table as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Anything for a
yeah.
joke. Are you kidding? If you would have a talk with my mother, if you put a camera in front of my mother,
Yeah.
she would ham it up in a way that she had
These are
amazing
the
comedic
four-
timing. A real comedic timing.
Her four
Yes.
four daughters. And you see, I'm just telling you fun. See, she would do fun.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Thank God. Thank God.
So it was very interesting because my father is much more of a conservative behavior. He's
Yeah,
more
he's
like
serious,
conservative,
and my
more
mother's the
dignified,
funny one.
serious. My mother was like the funny one. Yes, exactly. And when
So-
we discovered her diary, we found out how sensitive and spiritual she was. That we had no idea of her spirituality because it was so much of the diary were these phenomenal prayers that are like psalm-worthy, like out of Psalms. And we've actually had the Yeshiva Takoto asked to publish it. Yes, and they do. Every year they do, and they give out her prayer. It's something extraordinary. Yes, and this is something we didn't know because of, she was damaged after the war. She wouldn't share this part of her. So when we got her diary, we were able to actually meet this 16-year-old whom we never met. And I realized that, Hitler took everyone in our family, but they took my mother too. Like I never met this person. I never met this incredible poet who was sensitive, religious poet. And it was transformative for us to read this about our mother. And then we heard stories from all of her relatives of her heroics. So I'm sorry she's not here physically today. But,
Well, she's above him.
Yeah, she's above.
This is
Thank God.
amazing.
Thank God.
right.
Well, I'm extremely grateful.
Thank
And
you.
Thank you so
We're
much for
very
making
grateful.
this happen.
Thank you, Les. This is really an honor for us to have you be here and to hear the story. my
And if you
father's
want to
story.
supplement, we'll come back.
Thank you so
If
much.
you have any questions?
Yeah.
This is probably the piece de resistance of my collection. This is the postcard sent by Ignaz Grunsfeld to Lazar Weiser, and the Weiser family is a family I managed to track down as part of my research for this. And we've had a pretty momentous reunion a couple of days ago. Reunion's the wrong word, but we got to meet each other, which was really nice. And I had another card which I found subsequent to finding this one. I'd already offered them this one because I said that is really their family belongings, and they said no, you keep it. In fact, the word I was told was that the four aunties would fight over who owned it, so they didn't want it. But I've subsequently found another one and been able to pass it on to the family. So whether that fight happens or not, I don't know. But that's for them to sort out. But it was really nice to be able to give them some family history.
And where do they live?
They live in and around Jerusalem, and there's one of the sisters lives in the US. But Sigmund, this is his uncle that's doing the writing, survived as a 16-year-old Auschwitz in a death march to Buchenwald where he was liberated. And he lived in the States for a while, but he's been in Jerusalem for a long time.
So, Bruce, that story appears on the front page of Jerusalem Post today.
Yeah, I know, that's pretty special, really, to be honest. The one thing I'll say is I think is the Jerusalem Post probably got it slightly wrong. I mean, they showed the photo of this, which to me, I think human interest is in Siggy. It's not in this at all. But, anyway, so be it.
Right to me. Email that to you.
That's the back of the postcard there. You read the last slide.
To write.